Leo is the fifth sign of the zodiac. It is a fixed, fire, masculine sign, ruled by the sun and symbolized by the lion. And therefore, it is not surprising that it is said to be the sign of kings.
Surely Leo is a marvellous sign to be born under.
Well, because the sun is your ruler, it endows you with terrific confidence.
And if you feel confident enough, you're not afraid to tackle anything.
The sun is also said to give vitality and health.
And I associate happiness with the sun. I mean, we all know people are always much happier when the sun is shining.
Yours is the most vital sign of the zodiac. Perhaps the fact that Leos are born at the height of the summer has something to do with this. The world is certainly a warmer and more comfortable place to be born into in full summer. This may be one of the reasons why Leos do all seem to have sunny dispositions. You not only grow up to be people who love to make others happy, you also seem to regard happiness as your birthright.
Surely the expectation of happiness is what makes everyone want to go on living.
Even when life gets fraught, I still have the feeling that things will get better.
Now, what about the lion as our symbol?
It does tell us quite a bit about you. He is thought of as the king of beasts, and many of you seem to possess the courage, sense of power, and dignity of the lion. But he is not actually a very aggressive animal. He will only fight if he has to. Likewise, Leos don't have to be aggressive. Though, you can become very defensive about your pride and your opinions. You can't bear to have them criticized.
What about the other things you mentioned? You said we were a fixed fire masculine sign.
Well, the fire speaks for itself, really. 3 of the 12 signs of the zodiac are fire signs. They are Aries, Leo, and Sagittarius. And the people born under these 3 signs all have the energy, enthusiasm, and force of fire about them. They all have fairly fiery tempers too, but your flare-ups are sudden and short-lived. I also said yours was a fixed sign, and this tells us that unlike the restless Arian or the changeable Sagittarian, you are more assured and can either be fixed in your views or resistant to change, and at times unable to see anyone else's point of view.
Well, I'd have to admit that this is partially true. I'm not very sympathetic to those people who want to change just for the sake of change.
And the status quo may not be perfect, but at least it's safe. It's the devil you know, isn't it?
Whenever I say that some signs are masculine and some feminine, people always look a bit quizzical. So I had better explain that this is not a sexual description, but just an astrological way of saying that some signs are more outward-looking, that is masculine, and some more inward-looking or feminine. Yours is a masculine sign, and consequently, Leos do tend to be extrovert rather than introvert, and at the same time, you can stand alone if you have to. But on the whole, you like people around you, for you are happiest in any situation where your natural tendency and ability to dominate can be expressed.
Obviously, then, rule 1 has to be never try to rule a Leo.
I have sometimes heard that Leo is associated with the heart. Now, what exactly does this mean?
No one quite knows how the tradition arose, but in astrology, each sign is said to govern a part of the body, starting with Aries, which governs the head, Taurus, the neck and throat, and so on through to Pisces, which governs the feet. Now, Leo is said to rule the heart. The heart is the central organ of the body, and Leos have to be at the center of everything. Whatever you do it wholeheartedly. There are no half measures where Leos are concerned. The same applies to your giving and your spending. You are big-hearted in your generosity, and just as you love to give, you love to spend. Some Leos are in fact prodigiously extravagant, for not only do you like to give pleasure to other people, You like to have the best of everything yourself. Second best is just not good enough. It is no mere coincidence that the heart is associated with love. You feel compelled to give your heart to another, and love is desperately important to a Leo. In fact, in this case, it is more a question of the Leo following the dictates of their hearts, rather than Leo ruling the heart. You are extremely affectionate by nature, and tend to be over-demonstrative in love. The strength of your passions is sometimes far more than those you love can understand or give you in return. The splendor of your emotions can be exciting, but it can also be frightening, and few other people can reciprocate affection on your grand scale. But since total involvement is what you give, total involvement is what you expect from those you love. And many of you go through life never finding in a partner all the devotion and feeling you give and want. One of the reasons for this is the fact that, like the lion, you simply must dominate. In fact, any hint that you are not the most important person in the world distresses you immensely. Like Julius Caesar, you would rather be the first man in your own village than the second man in Rome. In any social gathering, you stand out, usually because you have made such an effort to look your best. This is relevant to any situation, from the largest family reunion to the most intimate dinner party. But you do like your efforts to be appreciated. And if you are doing the organizing, which you do magnificently, what you say is law.
So rule 2 must be never try to overrule a Leo.
I wouldn't choose to be any other sign of the zodiac, but I must admit that there are times when being a Leo lady has its drawbacks. I sometimes get the feeling that people are a bit frightened of me.
A bit? There's a certain larger-than-life quality about people born under Leo. And this is not unexpectedly more apparent in Leo women than in Leo men. For men are expected to dominate, and women are not.
In spite of the emancipation of women, and the fact that many women now work and will soon be getting equal pay for their work, the world still expects us to be all sweetness and light.
As a Leo lady, you just don't comply with this old-fashioned concept of femininity, and most of you seem to be made for bigger things than domesticity. This is not to say that you are unfeminine, simply that it is not in your nature to play a subsidiary role in life. You do, in fact, at times, make too much effort to be feminine, because you are afraid that men will not accept you as you are. You become disillusioned when your camouflage is unsuccessful, and you are still left to take control of things. You are the sort of women who can fulfill the demands of a responsible career, or who become queen bees of your local women's committees or organizations. It can't be coincidence that some Leo ladies who were born in relative obscurity nonetheless became the next best thing to being a queen. Madame du Barry, the mistress of Louis XV of France, and Mrs. Fitzherbert, the secret wife of George IV of England, were both Leos. If they were never crowned, they were still the power behind the throne. A number of Leo women gravitate towards and marry men on the way to the top, and thus achieve a position not unlike that of a queen. You often play a major part in your husband's success. Jackie Onassis, formerly the wife of the late President Kennedy of the United States, is not unexpectedly a Leo.
I hate to admit it, but it's when I'm in love that being a Leo lady is really tough.
Yes, it is at such times that many Leo women experience great personal difficulty. The sheer immensity of your feelings can frighten those you love. Remember that your rule of the sun is the most positive force in the zodiac. You are either drawn to weaker men who you can dominate but not admire, or to stronger men who you can admire but not dominate. There is a superb example in literature of your dilemma. The novel Wuthering Heights tells us a great deal about the magnificence and awesomeness of Leo passions, and sure enough, its authoress, Emily Bronte, was a Leo. Sadly, she was born a good 100 years before her time. She obviously identified very strongly with her characters, for such feelings could hardly be described by someone who had not been torn by similar conflicts herself. Annie Oakley, that pistol-packing queen of the Old West, is another example of the sheer force of a Leo lady. Didn't she complain, "You can't get a man with a gun"?
But that song was written by a man.
But he knew what he was talking about all the same. I'm not saying that you are doomed to be unhappy in love, but, as with anything else, self-knowledge can save you a great deal of sorrow. In other words, accept your strength. If it is any consolation, Leo ladies do tend to be utterly faithful once they have married. For although you like to enjoy royal privileges, you do know how to behave like a queen.
But all the same, Rule 3 had better be, never trifle with the affections of a Leo lady.
Now, obviously, not all Leo men are born to be kings. So what about the rest of us?
Leos have a natural air of authority about them, and this is a marvelous sign for a man. You tend to assume you are born to rule, but this can express itself in very different ways. If we look at some of the world-famous Leos, we can see that a few turned out to be despotic tyrants concerned with their own glory, but incapable of ruling wisely. More have accepted their responsibility of rulership because they genuinely believed that they were the best men for the job. And others have used their ability to govern in democratic organizations.
Dag Hammarskjöld was a Leo, wasn't he?
Yes, he was. His birthday was the 29th of July, 1905. And he was a perfect example of a Leo who relinquished all thought of personal glory and devoted his outstanding qualities of leadership to the service of his fellow men. He was a man whose great moral stature and obvious abilities led to his appointment as Secretary General of the United Nations.
I admired him tremendously, but I always thought he looked a rather lonely man.
He probably was, but as a result of his dedication to his job.
Napoleon is my particular hero. I know his life ended in disaster, but just think how much he achieved.
He does, in fact, display many of the virtues and faults of this sign. He certainly knew how to govern and was a natural leader. He was largely responsible for many reforms and completely reorganized the out-of-date penal system in France. It was when he became obsessed with his own glory that he went wrong. He tried to protect his position by putting his relatives in places of authority in the countries he conquered, and few of them had any of the necessary qualities. He married his sisters off for his own political advantage and swapped wives when he thought such a step would enhance his own position. Like many men who have got to the top on their own abilities, he wanted to found a dynasty to perpetuate his line. He didn't behave with Leo dignity in his personal life, however, and had mistresses throughout Europe.
Still, he was admirable in many ways. He was a man on a grand scale, one of the makers of modern France.
It is interesting that one of the makers of modern Italy was also a Leo, and so was the man responsible for its downfall during the last war. Cavour, the statesman who became the first Prime Minister of the United Italian States, was born on the 10th of August, 1810. Mussolini demonstrates all the worst excesses that Leo lust for power and personal glory can lead to. His birthday was the 29th of July, 1883. There are, at present, two more dominant figures on the world scene who have emerged as men of authority and strength, both Archbishop Makarios and Fidel Castro are fellow Leos.
Well, that's a fairly awe-inspiring list of names, I must say.
And whether they're good or bad, they are all names that will go down in history.
You do all have the urge to command, even if it's just in the home. But what some of you forget is that it also takes a sense of responsibility and considerable understanding to do so. You all demand respect, but you should remember that to command respect from others, a degree of self-control is essential.
All the same, I'll give you rule 4, and it's this. Always give a Leo the respect he thinks he deserves.
What did you mean when you said that ours was the 5th sign of the zodiac?
It seems to me that first place is the logical one for the sign of kings.
Well, just as there are 12 signs of the zodiac, there are also 12 houses in a horoscope, and each one represents a stage in human evolution. The sign of kings is obviously not the first, since in the very beginning it was probably a question of each man for himself. For this reason, Aries, which symbolizes man's fundamental struggle for existence, is the first. It is likely that thousands of years elapsed before man acquired the possessions, speech, and skills which enabled him to live in any one place with relative comfort and stability. By that stage, it probably became apparent that one strong man could look after the interests of many who were weaker, and natural leaders emerged to fulfill this role. Leo also represents the stage in our development when men became creative. When interpreting a birth chart, an astrologer will look to the 5th house, or the sign of Leo, for an indication of an individual's creativity in both senses of the word. That is, whether or not there are likely to be children, and also to determine in what way an individual's artistic or creative talents are likely to be expressed. Incidentally, an astrologer can also obtain a fairly accurate idea of a person's love life from the 5th house.
I've sometimes heard Leo spoken of as the sign of showmanship. Now, why is this?
This is another facet of the 5th house. Obviously, the theatre and entertainment in general are great sources of pleasure. The theatre in particular involves a great deal of show, and certainly in its infancy there was a large element of ritual and ceremony and drama, for it was closely linked with religion. There is also a considerable amount of show and symbolism in all the trappings of monarchy. Most Leos do in fact relish pomp and circumstance.
I think you're right there. I love watching processions and things like that. Though I must admit I'd much rather be taking part.
A large number of actors and actresses are born under Leo, as well as such showmen as Mick Jagger and Danny LaRue. You could almost guess that the man responsible for many famous Hollywood spectaculars, Cecil B. DeMille, was a Leo too, born on the 12th of August, 1881. A number of outstanding playwrights and novelists are also born under your sign, including Alexander Dumas, Guy de Maupassant, Herman Melville, Sir Walter Scott, John Galsworthy, George Bernard Shaw, Aldous Huxley, and Robert Bolt.
And wasn't Jung the great psychiatrist?
Yes, he was, and he certainly seems to have regarded man as more dignified creatures than Freud did. He was a typical Leo in that, for all his revolutionary theories, he was unwilling to discard man's cultural heritage. He firmly believed that there was a place in the modern world for religion and astrology. He was an example of Leo at its best, for he had a breadth of vision which is more usually found in your opposition sign of Aquarius. It is worth examining Aquarius more closely if you want to understand Leo, for your opposition sign not only illustrates in which areas you are likely to be deficient, but also indicates your own best and worst points. Like Aquarians, Leos do seem to feel responsibility for other people, but Leos can be more dogmatic, more defiant, and more willful than the most self-opinionated Aquarian.
Oh, but that's only when I'm absolutely convinced that I'm right about something. And other people just aren't big enough to admit when they're wrong.
If someone's going to have to give in, I don't see why it should be me. Besides, people usually admit that I'm right in the end.
Perhaps they're just conceding that might is right. Modesty is not one of your virtues.
But I've never met a modest Aquarian.
Anyway, if modesty is not one of our virtues, certainly false modesty is not one of our vices. We do know our own capabilities, even if we're not sure of our own failings.
And one of them is that, like Aquarians, you don't think you have any.
But Aquarians don't have much sense of humour. At least if they have, they don't share it.
While Leos have a really robust sense of humour and love a good joke.
As long as it's not at your expense.
Right. So Rule 5 must be, never laugh at a Leo.
Because, as we said, the sign of Leo is ruled by the sun, and therefore you have abundant energy and optimism. You are usually able to cope with life's problems much better than others. Your basic character and straightforwardness enables you to get to grips with your difficulties. Perhaps this is because you definitely don't suffer in silence, and your dilemmas are minimized by the fact that you don't suppress your anger or stifle frustrations. You have to face your problems and force others to face them too. There are just two periods during 1971 when you may find it difficult to come up with the right solution to the problems that involve your marriage or partners. And these are in February and in August. On the 10th of February, the sun is in the sign of Aquarius and the moon is in your own sign of Leo, and they directly oppose each other. In Aquarius, the sun is as far away from its natural home as it can possibly be, and its power is decidedly reduced, while the moon in your own sign suggests that some sort of conflict between your ego and your feelings will take place. The time of any full moon is important, because these two forces, the sun and the moon, have the greatest immediate effect on this planet, and to have them in opposition to each other is bound to cause tension and anxiety. The effect will be more acute because at that time they will be in eclipse. The astrological interpretation, as far as you are concerned, is that you and your partners have become estranged emotionally, if not physically. It looks as if you're going to have to find some common ground to enable you to continue the relationship, or at worst, agree to separate. Obviously, not every Leo marriage is going to come to an end, but all of you will feel in some way insecure, isolated, or uneasy about any form of partnership. After all, Aquarius is not only your house of marriage and partnership, but also your house of open enemies. And the operative word is open, something that is not hidden or closed. So at least both you and your partner will be equally aware of the problems which need to be resolved. It is just a question of which one of you is prepared to take the initiative and start to be constructive instead of being destructive. However, it may not be until the second eclipse on the 6th of August, when the planetary situation is reversed and the sun is back in Leo and the moon in Aquarius, that final and irrevocable decisions can be made. The greatest danger at the time of both these eclipses is that your Leo pride could prevent you from reaching an understanding or settlement, and consequently, the strain on everyone's emotions could produce untypical behavior from normally noble Leos.
You said that Aquarius was our house of marriage, partnerships, and open enemies. What do the other 11 houses represent?
You know that Leo is your first house, which represents your ego, and what you basically are. And then each consecutive sign corresponds with an area of your life. Virgo, your money and how you earn it. Libra represents communication and how you get on with your relatives. Scorpio is your home. Sagittarius, your love life, children, pleasures and creativity.
That sounds nice.
Capricorn is your work and health. We have dealt with Aquarius. Pisces represents any financial arrangements involving other people. Aries is your house of travel and the higher mind. Taurus represents your career. Gemini, your friends. And Cancer, your 12th house, symbolizes secrets, restrictions, and anything that is hidden from the world. And this includes your unknown enemies. So, it is the placing of the planets in these 12 houses and the aspects they make to each other that tells an astrologer which areas of your life are going to be fun and which aren't.
Well, it's quite clear that marriage isn't.
I think it would be foolish for any astrologer to say it would be with those wretched eclipses in 1971. But they do affect everyone else in some way, so don't expect too much sympathy. And now on to the other planets. Saturn has been in Taurus.
That's our career, isn't it?
Yes. And it is also what other people think of you. Saturn has been in Taurus for the past 2 years. And in many ways, it should have improved your professional standing, but not without creating many personal problems for you. For in the 10th house, it opposes your 4th house, which is your home, and it is at a bad angle to your 7th, which is your marriage or partnerships. So you may well be of the opinion that professional success or acclaim was only achieved at the price of personal happiness. Alternatively, you may feel that you have not been fully compensated for your efforts and that others have not contributed enough to any project. Saturn remains in Taurus until the 19th of June, when it moves into Gemini. So during the first half of 1971, there will not be any radical changes, and you will still wonder whether or not professional success is worth all the effort it demands.
I do seem to have worked much harder during the last couple of years, but where a career is concerned, one really doesn't have much option.
Wherever Saturn is situated, he seems to demand much and promise little. But Saturn is like a strict but wise schoolteacher. He is a disciplinarian who gets marvelous results. When Saturn has moved out of Taurus, you will be agreeably surprised to discover how much you have achieved.
But if it creates trouble wherever it goes, what is going to happen when it gets into Gemini?
Because Saturn will no longer be at a bad angle to your birth sign, the strain will be much less severe. Gemini is your house of friends, and it will simply be a question of sorting out the sheep from the goats.
But I seem to be doing that all the time.
Well, you'll have had plenty of practice then, won't you?
Can we get back to that bit that sounded so nice? You know, the bit about love affairs, children and pleasure.
Well, I doubt if any other sign is going to benefit more from the presence of the 2 major planets, Neptune and Jupiter, in the sign of Sagittarius than you big-hearted Leos. Now, Sagittarius, as you know, is a fire sign like your own, and any planets in Sagittarius at any time of the year do tend to be beneficial to you. But Neptune and Jupiter are 2 exceedingly powerful forces, and their combined influence should turn your life upside down in the nicest possible way. Neptune is inspirational, romantic, sensitive, and sensational in all senses of the word. By this I mean that your senses will become more acute, but could at the same time lead you astray, and your life will not be lacking in adventure. At the same time, Jupiter will make you more adventurous.
I rather like the sound of Jupiter. If Jupiter is involved, then we must be in for a good time.
Well, you won't have experienced such benefits since Jupiter was last in Sagittarius, and that was 12 years ago. Single Leos particularly will be more carried away by the emotional side of Jupiter, and many of you may, in fact, meet the love of your life in 1971.
Oh, how lovely.
The happiness of married Leos is more likely to be associated with their children. All of you who are concerned in any way with creative work will find your talents rewarded, and this is definitely the year for Leos who are dissatisfied with their jobs to make a bold and adventurous change, for you would be happier and more successful in more creative work. The last planet to be considered, but not the least powerful, is Uranus. Uranus is in Libra and has been there for a couple of years, so by now you should be used to the vagaries of your family, near relatives and those closest to you.
And how are they going to behave in 1971?
As usual, unpredictably.
But isn't there any way to make them behave more reasonably?
With Uranus in Libra, none whatsoever. For Uranus makes people break all the rules and traditions, but at the same time ensures that life is exciting.
But I can do without that kind of excitement.
All the same, it's rather nice to know that there is a reason for their behavior. I was beginning to think it was all my fault. Is there any reliable rule in astrology which tells you who you should get on with?
There is a rule, but I don't think it's reliable because it's too limiting. Tradition has it that you should get on best with the signs which share the same element as you, that is fire. I'm convinced that the combination of two fire signs is just too combustible, unless, of course, there are other factors in personal horoscopes to indicate otherwise. But let's hear what you think of them. Do you like Aries?
Aries women never sit still long enough for me to find out.
And Aries men never stay around long enough to find out about me.
And Sagittarius?
If anything, they're too concerned with their ideals.
It's irrelevant whether they're right or wrong. They've just got to argue with you.
And what about the rest? How do you get on with Virgoans?
Well, I find both the men and the women can upset me, because they can only see the faults in my character. And what's more, they will keep telling me about them.
And their eye for detail may be useful, but it drives me mental.
Now Librans.
I never have any trouble getting on with the Libran men.
And the lovely thing about Libran ladies is that they don't take themselves too seriously.
Scorpio?
I know that a lot of people are afraid of Scorpios, but they don't frighten me.
Well, I think Scorpio ladies can be a bit difficult to cope with.
What about Capricorns?
They're reliable, but they're not really much fun.
They have an efficiency which I respect.
And Pisces?
They're endearingly inefficient.
Taurus?
Well, I can't really tell the difference between them and Capricorn.
And what about Gemini?
They're fun, but their right hand never knows what the left is doing.
I'm not always in the mood for their talkativeness.
And Cancer?
Well, Cancerian ladies do have something over every other woman. They don't have to try to be feminine.
I've discovered that they're tougher than they seem.
And what about another Leo?
Marvellous.
Perfection.
There are, in fact, very few people that Leos don't or can't get on with. So, Leo, ruled by the sun, your part in the great wheel of the zodiac is, in a way, to revitalize us all with your warmth and generosity. Also, as the sign of kings, you have it in you and responsible. But above all else, as Leo rules the heart, surely in a world that places a premium on progress and efficiency, there must still be a place for love and affection.